Oops. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I am your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian, also most technologically not savvy libertarian. Apparently, today we've been having some challenges, but no worries. We are getting past it. All right. This morning, Fridays, are my dad talks days. That's where I step aside and I stop talking about politics and culture and I either talk about something from the perspective of a man or a husband or a father or some variation of all three, or better yet, I bring on a dad and we talk about something that's important to him because that's how we raise dad voices. So please give a warm welcome this morning as I bring on Seth Ryan to talk about his IVF journey. Seth, good morning, sir.
Good morning, brother. Glad that we worked through all the issues.
Yeah, I was getting nervous there for a second because I was like, wait, if it's on my end, then it's a scramble to try to fix it. If it's
Yeah.
on somebody else's end, then you're just like, my hands are tied. I can't even
Yep.
see what you're looking at, so I don't even know what to suggest.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad to get into it, brother. Ironically, the podcast that I am putting out today is going to be my podcast over losing our embryo, losing our son. And
Mhm.
I had another guy who actually had a daughter that survived to 2.5 years old and then passed.
Mm.
And she was, the doctors gave her like a question mark when she was born. They said she could die today or she
Oh,
could
wow.
die anytime. We have no idea because the case she had was so rare. They didn't even know of a specialist to even call. It had like 5 names. And
Wow.
it was one of the most genetically rare things. And so every day was a gift with her, but also she was born blind, deaf, and the joints in her body didn't form
Mm.
properly.
Mm.
So it was, yeah. So that podcast, I spent a lot of time, man, just re-going over and thinking through a lot of this stuff and trying to process it because it's still so fresh
Right.
to me. So
So
yeah,
before
so
we
let's jump
dive
right
into
in.
before we dive into your story, I just want to let the audience know I ran across Seth when I went to Podfest. So it's a podcast
Hmm.
festival or convention. And to be frank,
Hmm.
I didn't really expect to meet too many people there because I'm not the most outgoing when it comes to crowds. I'll stand in front of a crowd and talk, but don't ask me to go talk to one person. And we just by happenstance managed to be talking to the same person, and Seth mentioned that he was a dad and that he had an IVF story. And I was like, oh, and I was like, well, and so that I just took the opportunity and I'm glad that I did. So now that we've got that out of the way, tell us your IVF journey. Because I remember like being kind of fascinated and wanting to hear more. So here we are.
So here we are. This story starts back, we'll forward very quickly through it. My wife and I have been together for 18 years. She's also a combat veteran Marine, and we always just assumed because we're very healthy conscious and very fit and stay active that we were going to have no issues having kids.
Right.
But then kids didn't come and kids still didn't come and kids still didn't come. And we were trying for kids and it just wasn't happening. And after probably 4 or 5 years, you start to wonder like, okay, there's got to be something here that's the issue. Well, of course,
Mhm.
I go to the doctor and run blood work and all those things. Hey, you're completely healthy, of course. I'm sure, you could go get testing, but it's a little pricey. And so we ended up, me and my wife both kind of assumed maybe it was more on her end. And that was because her mother had issues when she was having her. And then as she was growing up, she kind of grew too fast. And the
Mhm.
doctor said, well, that can lead to infertility issues in the future. And just them saying those words when she was a child in middle school to
Mhm.
her mother made her mother tell me that there might be possible issues having kids. So it was just one of those weird things where we assume it might be her. Fast forward as we're getting tested, and it ended up being me. And so she's healthy, she's able to have kids. It's me. But my levels are so low that I'm going to have to do something to make IVF happen. And at that point, we're 14 years into marriage, 15 years into marriage. And I'm like, okay, well, I was in special ops,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in the Marine Corps, then Army Special Operations in the 75th Ranger Regiment, obviously, on my I Love Me wall behind me. And I was like, well, I could go back to Baghdad. I could try to get into the triple canopy bodyguard work that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
end up doing when I got out. And so that's what I did. And I ended up deploying in 2019, December of 2019, to Baghdad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the ambassador's protection detail. And that's where I survived the embassy attacks that everyone
Mm-hmm.
forgot because of COVID. And long
Right.
story short, I made enough money over that year and a half, 2 years roughly, of time that I spent over there to start the IVF process. And it was very, very easy
Mm-hmm.
at the very beginning, because you go in, you go, I think because we're both healthy, we're not going to have any issues with this. Everybody's going to tell you horror stories, but we're both very positive people, and we knew ourselves. And so we were just like, we think that all of those things can happen, but they're not going to happen to us necessarily. And
Right.
if they do happen, then we are going to mentally be prepared for that. So we were
Mm-hmm.
cautiously optimistic. So if
Right.
I'm going too fast, let me know.
No, you're good. To make sure I understand the
Mhm.
cost.
Whoa, hang on. You
There,
disappeared. There you go.
I have
You're
no
back.
idea what happened here. We might.
Go ahead. You're good. The day
That's
continues.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know what happened. Okay. So I don't know anything about IVF. I've heard of,
Okay.
I've got some friends that went through it and I
Yep.
hear bits and pieces.
Mhm.
So my understanding is that IVF is expensive. Is that the
Very
case?
expensive. Yes.
Okay.
Very expensive.
And so you basically said it's the military version of I'm working overtime, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, because I'm a personal contractor. So if I'm working, I'm making money. If I'm home, I'm not making anything. And I ended up leaving there August or September, very end of August, 1st of September of 2021 is when I came back from
Hmm.
contracting and started the IVF process. Pretty much we started looking into where we were going to go and what we needed to do immediately. And my wife had already kind of been doing her own work there. Luckily, the place that we found that looked really promising, according to everything that we could find. And this is the hard part. So this is where you start. The hard part is Google reviews
Hmm.
and Yelp reviews don't apply to IVF clinics.
Okay.
So when you're looking for one, the place that we ended up going to in Tampa is Shady Grove is the name of the place we went. If you look them up on Google, they have very, very, very few reviews. They have good
Mm,
reviews, but it's tiny. Like you'd go, is this place even in business? Is this
wow.
serious? Like you got a handful of people that have ever left a review here and you're giving them children.
Right.
So skip forward to I I mean I probably about a year ago left them a review because I completely forgot to even do that.
Mm,
And so that's the hardest part is the very beginning. The hardest part is finding a place that is a reputable place by the normal metrics that everyone uses, which
right.
you can't, those don't necessarily apply. So we started asking people that we knew from our church, and we have kind of a large church. Several people had done IVF or had been through the process, even if they didn't successfully complete it.
Hmm.
And they had recommendations, and multiple people recommended Shady Grove. So
Okay.
we went off of word of mouth, truly.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
That's interesting. So, are there places that are not reputable? I mean, in the U.S.
So unfortunately, you hear the horror stories, and we did hear that from some people that we met, or that we were asking. They had not, they'd gone through a different place, in a different state they had lived in, and then we're Florida, so everybody moves here, right?
Right.
Just like I did. Uh, so they had very terrible the service that comes along with it, as far as them just the professionalism, right, of explaining to you every step of the way is the number one thing that most places drop the ball on. So if
Okay.
you go to an IVF clinic and you first reach out and you set up a consultation, and that consultation starts getting pushed to the left, and oops, they forgot about this, or oh,
Mm,
actually you've got to fill out this paperwork, and I forgot to tell you that, that's your first clue that this, if they can't get that right, right, just like I mentor, right, young men, like, if you can't get your shoes tied and your the proper clothes on and get out the door with the things you need to go to work,
right.
like, how are you expecting to fly through the ranks and be promoted? Like, it's the very simple things with IVF that you pay attention to at the very beginning, and it does tell you a lot about how the rest of the process is going to go.
Wow. Because it it seems to me that when it's more, from my perspective, IVF is not a very common thing. One, it's expensive, and it seems like not that many couples are seeking it out. Like there are a lot, but
Mhm,
in comparison to like say natural births and stuff like
mhm,
that, or maybe so it almost seemed like a like a rare thing or limited thing. And so I would
mhm.
think in that sense, the few places that do it would actually be good at it, but I guess they're just as susceptible to, to failure as
Mhm.
many other businesses. So that's fascinating because I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, on that note, there's a lot of extremely, extremely capable and just very proficient at a task,
Mhm,
and yet they're terrible with people and with managing or running an organization. So it might be the best mechanic on in the state,
mhm.
might be terrible at hiring employees and
Okay.
motivating his employees. So you might go to a place where everything is just garbage, but the
Mhm.
guy actually knows what he's doing, but you'll never know that because you're leaving when they can't get your scheduling right, when
Gotcha.
they keep dropping the ball there. And that's, I think that's the frustration that some people in, right, when they're first looking, they end up running into is that wall of they can't get in with a place that's just this smooth process
Mhm.
through. And so a lot of people, that's another part of it, is give up, and
Right.
they give up too soon and too easily. But again, I would caution you to go through the process of reaching out to more than one clinic. The
Mhm.
word of mouth is very, very valuable, and I would say the most important thing. But definitely, check out more than one, so that way you know kind of what to expect, and also what pricing wise
Mhm.
it's like. So yeah, it is rare. However, once you get into the process, if you started asking your friends, "Hey, we're thinking about IVF. Do you recommend, or do you know anybody?" You would be, my guess is you'd be blown away at how many people you're connected to that have all either been through the process, or, know somebody very close in their family that have been through
Gotcha.
the process. It's growing dramatically in the United
Gotcha.
States.
Yeah, I do know some people. I know
Mhm,
2 people personally and a couple of more that I've never met, but
mhm,
I'm familiar that, with their story a little bit. So let me ask you, and maybe this is prying, so feel free to just be like, "None of
mhm.
your damn business."
Now you're good.
Um,
I'm an open book.
so you're a ranger.
Mhm,
So presumably you're pretty fit. You're pretty
mhm,
healthy, right? Um, so I guess my question is, if the issue is with you, the only sign was infertility? Is like, how does like, do you know how that works out? Because a lot of times, I guess we're familiar with if somebody's having a problem, there are maybe some other symptoms or
mhm,
signs that maybe just go unnoticed. Is
mhm.
that the case? Or is that literally just like You don't know until you go to have children, and then you find out.
Here's what I'll say to that. It was very eye-opening for me that once I found out it was me,
Mhm.
I started reaching out to my other ranger buddies. Guess what a common thread is amongst all the guys that I know?
Mhm.
Infertility issues.
Hmm.
So you're talking about the top 1% of the military and physical fitness. We would PT test, feel free, throw us against anybody that you would like,
Sure.
toe to toe. The reality is, we don't have the answer. I can tell you that I have been um, inoculated more than any other human that you've ever met,
Right.
but I don't even have documentation to prove that, because the number of times that they just jammed us with a needle right before we were about to go for a run in the morning, and then never bothered to write it down,
Mhm. Mhm.
is was odd to us, but we didn't really think about it too much.
Right.
Because you have the card, you have to bring it to them,
Mhm.
they fill it out, or they pull it out and fill it out right there in front of you. I ended up getting my card because when I redeployed to Baghdad, they had to see what my vaccinations were. And it is, I only have 12, 15 vaccinations even on there. And we were getting injected so often with so many things. It was ridiculous. That's
Mhm.
like, no, I drink a lot more water than that. You're telling me I drank water 5 times in the last year?
Right.
No, no, bro. I drank a
Right.
lot more water than that.
Yeah,
Um,
we had a similar. I was Army U.S. National Guard. Or, said that all wrong.
yeah.
Army National Guard, and we deployed to Bosnia, and there
Oh
was
yeah.
one instance where they gave us vaccinations, and I think it might have been the next day. They're like, "We need to revaccinate you," and we're like, "But we had them yesterday," and they're like, "Yeah, we don't have record of it or something." They're like, "We lost the
Mhm.
record." It was crazy. I was like,
Yeah.
and all of us were like, "We had the vaccine, whatever you gave us yesterday." I don't remember now, and they were like, "Yeah, but we got to do it again." We're like, "The hell are you talking about?" We they're like, "It's not on your card." They're like, "But we're all telling you it didn't matter."
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
crazy. I
Yep.
tell people today, when I was avoiding the COVID vaccine specifically,
Mhm.
people are like, "What are you anti-vaccine?" And I'm like, "I've had more vaccines than you, so shut up."
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
continue on, sir.
But the specifically, if you can remember the anthrax vaccinations was the precursor to, for the military
Mhm.
people, COVID. Like, that was the only one that I can ever remember being a topic that veterans were pushing back on.
Yep.
And it ended up coming true. Like, turns out there's a lot of bad things that went along with getting your anthrax shot.
Right.
And that's a series of, I think it's 6
Yeah,
anthrax
it's something
shots.
like that.
Yeah, I
I
have
wasn't
all
I didn't have that worry, but the others I
all
knew
6
did.
of those are documented. Of my documented ones, all the anthrax are documented.
Gotcha.
So I have all of those that you shouldn't ever take, but here I am.
Right.
And I think, again, when I deployed to Baghdad, same thing. I lived through COVID lockdown at the Baghdad embassy. Because if you remember in the news, Americans, anybody from the Middle East wasn't allowed in America.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if you're American,
Right.
which when you're in America, you don't really think about that. You're like, oh, there's Americans that live there. No,
Mhm.
I don't live in Baghdad. That's not where I reside.
Right.
And so during that entire time, the COVID vaccines that they ended up sending over to us ended up being tainted. I say that very cautiously when I say turned out to be. I mean, several people that I know had life altering issues after taking the vaccine,
Mm.
and so that whole argument came up there. And a part of that was like, I'm going to go through IVF. I'm not trying to put anything else in my body
Mhm.
at this point. And if I'm going to take the COVID vaccine, if that's going to be done in America, not in Baghdad,
Right.
standing out here, with who knows what's actually in the all the games that you end up learning once you get on that side of the house. It's unique. So
Gotcha.
yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we've kind of narrowed it down and said, hey, there seems like there's a coincidence
Mhm.
among the some of the members of the military with all the shots that we've been given.
Mhm.
So now you're moving forward and you're like, all right, you're back home from Baghdad. You've got some extra cash. You're ready to go through this
Mhm.
process. What's the next part of the story?
So the next part of the story is we've decided on Shady Grove. We've talked to them. We met with the doctor. Um, everything seemed really good. Everything was really good. And so our questions he's answering, their nurses are getting back with us. They're being able to be very helpful with the information. They're very knowledgeable. Everything just seemed to go very, very smoothly. And so we're now set up for, I have to give my sample and they take that, and then she has to do the egg growth process, right?
Hmm.
Which this is one of the more uncomfortable parts for the female, for a woman going through IVF, because my wife ends up right naturally. Her body is going to have one egg, all the rest are going to be disposed of, and that's the one egg that can be implanted by the swimmer that wins, and that's how natural birth works. Well, in this process, instead, you're tricking the body into believing that it needs to produce as many eggs, and all of them can be the fertile egg. So all
Hmm.
of these eggs are growing to be the one, and there ends up being a huge number of them. And she has to take that all the way to the point to where then they go in and pull all of those out, which I think we started out with, and this is where the numbers start coming in and you really get confused at the beginning. The number was something like, it was high 30s, low 40s. It was like 38, 39, 40, 41ish, somewhere
Hmm.
in there was the first number they gave us of how many eggs they had retrieved. And I'm like, okay, so wait, so all those are going to work? How are we going to? They're like, no, 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 no. This is just the first round. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. You did say that before, the first round, and there's going to be a lot of rounds. Okay, cool. But they keep updating you as to which ones are continuing to grow and which ones start to deteriorate.
Hmm.
So how IVF works now, they're going to take my sperm, her eggs, and they're going to try to marry them up and see which ones can actually grow. And
Hmm.
they only make it to normally to day 5. And during that process, how many of them survive to the point where they've implanted them. And then from there, that's kind of the first big hurdle, and so that number drops by 5 or 6. And then now they're testing day 1 and they're waiting to see if they're going to grow or they're going to die. And then that number drops, right? Several more drop off. And then so that time when people are asking you was one of the more frustrating parts, I think, for us, because again, we don't want to get our hopes up, but we want to also have hope. And so when we keep hearing the number drop, I'm just like, it's okay. We started with a very high number. We're not trying to have 40
Right.
kids. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And they kept reassuring us, even if we get down to 1, that's okay. As long as we get 1 that's healthy. So that number ends up dropping down. Day 5 goes, and I believe the number ended up finally dropping down to like 10. And day 5 we still had 10. Day 6 we had 9, and they said normally they stop at day 6, and this again is just the clinic I went through, but there was still one of them that was not quite over the last hurdle,
Hmm.
not over the finish line. And they said, we're going to wait for this one for one more day and see. And on day 7, even though it had been growing, on day 7, it finally started deteriorating and it ended up not making the cut. But me and my wife both kind of jokingly said / not joking at all,
Mhm.
if that one turns, then that's the one that we're going with first. Because
Mhm.
if he slides in underneath the door as it's shutting, right, like Indiana
Right.
Jones, if
Right.
that's the one that has the will to live,
Yep.
that's the one we're going to give the first opportunity to. And he ended up, that one ended up not. But so we ended up with a total of, at that point, I believe it was 8. And then from there was still another process that I didn't remember. And that was when they're testing them and they're going to freeze them. However, that process works
Mhm.
there, from that finish line to the next finish line, um, we ended up dropping off 2. So now we have the total number. So the total number that are frozen, are good to go,
Mhm.
and we opted for the genetic testing. We also know that not only are they from the outside what you can visually inspect, graded at just like school papers, A+, A-,
Mhm.
a B, a B+, and down to an F. Well, usually if it's below a D, it's usually not going to be usable anyways.
Mhm.
Um, so we ended up with 6, and the first 3 genetically wise were like A+, or the lowest was like A, was a straight A. So
Mhm.
we've got A's, and visually the first 2 were A+, A+. Genetically perfect, visually everything's good. The very first one that we put in was a boy, and his name is Archer. You see that in the photo that I shared and you had up on your page. So that
Mhm.
we put one in and got one out. Now that process of deciding whether we wanted to put in the perfect boy or the perfect girl embryo, because we had the 2 A+, A+, was, we were butting heads. And we were butting heads about names for boys. But when it came to girls, name was easy, and we were very easy on that. But my wife thought that I needed to have a girl first because that would soften me up. Something about being aggressive, I don't understand it, but just like I live my life aggressively in a
Mhm.
positive way. I walk too fast. I'm working on 15 things at once all the
Right.
time. All the things that you shouldn't do, I do anyways. And I was like, I don't know if you've looked outside lately. It's a rough world out there. We need a
Right.
big brother for all of the younger siblings. We don't need
Right.
the oldest to be a sister. So we went with the, like a draft stock in the NFL. She got to draft the first name for the boy if I get the boy, and then I get the middle name.
Mhm.
And so Archer, and then middle name is Bennett, and he's named after my best friend, my roommate from the Ranger Regiment. That's the guy that
Gotcha.
helped me mentally survive being a Christian
Mhm.
while I was a Ranger.
Gotcha.
So
Sounds like a tough challenge. Wow, that's wild. So let me ask you, I know when you have your more typical pregnancy, and I mean like the natural birth, there are certain points where the likelihood of going on to becoming a live birth dramatically increase. So
yes,
like I think the first day, the first moment is like after like 6 days, after the egg has been fertilized, and then many eggs don't make it like the next 6 days or something like that. And then
yeah,
after that, the next major milestone for getting to a live birth is like around 12 weeks, somewhere around there,
right,
which kind of
correct,
coincides with the notion that we don't really divulge, married couples don't divulge that they're pregnant until about 12 weeks, because that's when the odds sharply increase. Are there milestones like that in the IVF process where it's like, all right, you get past this, this is one milestone, you're looking good, and then is there a point where you're like, we're basically in the safe area, or
so
is it always a
yes,
struggle?
it's always a struggle. And this is part of that. And
Hmm.
there's, I want to bring this up because this is very crucial. When I talk to people who had been through the IVF process that had failed to
Hmm.
ever have a live birth, as well as people that had successfully completed it, there was one common theme that all of them said. The even their doctors had told them, and these are people that have done IVF, a decade ago, when it was, obviously a lot more new and still wasn't as refined as it is today. And that is, don't count on the first embryo to work. Never count on the first embryo to work. Do not count on the second embryo to work. We do not count on the second embryo. The third embryo is, for us, our first embryo. The statistics will tell you that typically the third embryo is the highest likelihood, because again, we're trying to trick the body using chemicals. As
Mhm.
refined as we have it to this day, we're still attempting to trick the female body into believing that it's already pregnant,
Mm.
and then we're putting the embryo in, and we've got to trick the body into thinking that it's so many days pregnant, because otherwise
Oh,
it can reject it if that's not perfect. So
there's a mismatch.
but it goes down to this: if you're doing the injections and you're putting those in, and you do that hours off of time, and you can't let more than 24 hours pass before the next injection. So my wife had it dialed down to, like, we were within 5 minutes
Mhm.
every single time, always. And that did include her going to Disney World, going out to the parking lot and having her best friend inject her at the right time. Like,
Wow.
no excuses, no deviations. You have to have it in the right spot, and you have to have it consistently all the time. So
Wow.
that is the very first thing that you can screw up on your end. So all the doctors and everything else could be doing it all right, and the embryo is fine, but you end up forgetting, throwing off the time. Oh no, I forgot to bring my injections with me, and you're on a trip, and now you've got to figure it out. And that just amount, the few hours that could pass,
Mhm.
could, doesn't mean it will, but it could be the loss of that entire embryo. And so the very beginning, you're focused on what you can control and what you can do. And you're right, the 6th day, this is a weird one, but every single time we did an injection, we had to go to McDonald's to get McDonald's fries, because there's some weird thing out there that everybody says you have to go get McDonald's French fries. Yeah, whoever's in charge of the marketing for that is a genius. But my wife would absolutely, this was not a game for her. We are going
Right.
to McDonald's, we are getting fries. I don't care if it's stupid. I know that it's not healthy, but we're going to
Right.
do it anyways. And we always did it. So, but that is something you'll hear in running in circles, and you'll
Hmm.
just be like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Correct. It makes no sense. But it's those little things that your very first, right. Okay, I did the McDonald's fries. Okay, I'm doing the injections. We're keeping these down. Everything's going good.
Right.
And it's after your first week, you start feeling, I think part of that too is you start feeling better about that. You haven't had, you're going to that very first appointment instead of the first week. And this is what I'm trying to get to. You want proof that it's still there and it's still viable.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there are things like, yeah, we want to check this, your blood work and all these other things, but it isn't until, like, you get a actual checkup from the doctors that for you it feels real, that the baby is 100% in there, and that you're not just talking to your wife's stomach and lunch, dinner.
Mhm.
um, but we're doing all the things, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I mean, the baby could have completely, you could have already had a miscarriage and we wouldn't have known, type
Right.
of a thing in the back of your mind. We get to the first checkup and the baby's still there. You're right. Once you get to about 3 months in, that's when people are usually going to share that they're pregnant. Now, doing IVF, if you've already talked to all these people, you just understand the spotlight's going to be on you from day one, because
Mhm.
everybody's going to want to know where you are in the process the whole time. And that, as I learned later, can come with a double-edged sword, because that means everybody's going to know and constantly be asking you how things are going with the pregnancy. And when you lose the baby, you end up with a miscarriage, everyone knows it right away. And and it's not something that you can take time to yourself to process, because you're going to get flooded with people sending prayers and messages and just letting you know they're thinking about you. And that is obviously amazing. At the same time, that if you're letting people know about you going through the process, that's gone. So whenever you say, like, if this is a source of, or, if this is asking too much, it's not. And that's part of it. Part of the IVF journey is letting people know, and them being a part of that process. And so I think for that reason, that brought me and my wife closer, because, right, we're relying on each other to make this happen. I'm doing all the injections. We're making sure that we're keeping each other accountable with every task that we have to do. So yeah, so I think it's also a bonding experience that people never think about that side of it. They think that it's going to be stressful and it could tear a marriage apart. And if you let it, yeah, it absolutely can. And it has certainly torn marriages apart when it doesn't work, and one starts blaming the other person for not doing this right or doing that right. And if you go into it with that type of negativity, like, the body really is affected, especially a pregnant mother, with stress, with cortisol, with these things that affect her ability to be pregnant. So that's a part of it that no one ever talks about, is you need to be as stressless as you could possibly be. And your husband is very much tasked at helping make that happen. So all the things that I stressed my wife out with before, we're taking all that off the table now. Anything laundry I'm screwing up, dishes I'm screwing up, whatever it is, if there's something that is going to stress her out, and she's not a dictator. She let me know, and we communicated and worked through that. The byproduct is, after the miscarriages and everything happened, now we've been in communication. We've drawn closer, both having the success of having Archer and a baby, but also, drawn closer together by the loss, the babies that didn't make it.
Wow. So let me ask you, you're a tough guy, obviously. You're a ranger, right?
My mom tells me that,
right.
but
You're used to high tense situations. You've been accustomed to them.
Yeah, this is not a haircut by choice. It all fell out. Yeah,
I hear you. So, and there's always a demand on men to be stoic, stiffen the upper lip, and that's whether you're an Army Ranger or you're an accountant. It doesn't much matter.
Yep.
And so now you've got this added layer, like you've got, a wife that's going through, well, you both are going through it. Physically, your wife is going through a process that you are not, in the physical sense, because it's her body. And now you're trying to, ease her stress, but you still got all these demands. Do you remember how you felt personally going through this? Were there times where you were like struggling to kind of keep that stoic, stiff upper lip, but you had to remember, like, hey, I've got to be the strong one? Or did you guys work out some different process? Like, tell me about how your emotions were with everything all together.
Yeah, I would say it's a roller coaster. And with, again, because I started in the Marine Corps, and and I bring that up specifically because when I tell people Marine Corps boot camp completely changed my life, not because it changed me. It didn't change me. Truly, what it did was bring out who I was.
Okay.
And taught me discipline. It enforced discipline on who I already was. And from that moment, I like to joke, my second birth, I appeared to be unrecognizable to anybody who knew me prior to that, because I was an overweight. I had buck teeth when I was a little kid, and like I was a very seemingly introverted person, but I was also kind of a prankster and I like to joke around and I was positive, but I wasn't confident to really put myself out there. And I certainly wasn't ever volunteering to go first to do any task. You
Mhm.
ask people for volunteers, I am the last person raising my hand.
Right.
Skip forward to 19, graduate Marine Corps boot camp. Now I'm raising my hand before you volunteer. I'm volunteering myself for all these things. So I say that now I go through 4 combat deployments in special operations. The Jessica Lynch rescue was my first combat mission. So I get to live through history. I get to be in the same room as Saddam Hussein.
Mhm.
So I get to be a part of some crazy things during that process. And then as a police officer, 100% I have the ability to appear to be robotic. I can shut off the outward looking emotion, but on the inside, yeah, I'm mentally I'm a wreck.
Mhm.
Um, it's still there. I'm able to calm a lot of that with my faith because I know that ultimately, even if we don't, none of these children end up working. None of the embryos become children. Okay, well then that's just a different path that God has for us. And when 14 years of no children, we'd already discussed adopting children. And there's multiple people at our church family congregation that have adopted children. So that was always something in the back pocket, like, okay, this is plan A.
Mhm.
If plan A is not the path for us, then plan B. And we'll figure that out when we get to it. We want to continue to pursue plan A until the bridge is no longer there, right?
Mhm.
Until there's no way across. Um, and so I think that is one of the keys to both us mentally surviving individually
Mhm.
as well as us working together. When you're going through something that everybody else is like, well, we're praying for you. You know, you're going through the IVF process and it's going good. Every single time you go to a doctor's appointment, everything they have to tell you is positive news. It makes you feel, it can give you a false sense of security, like, oh yeah, I got this then. Yeah, no, this is going to be smooth sailing. You can't, if you start letting yourself go down that path, you could set yourself up for failure. On the other end, and this is something that I was recently talking with somebody about on a podcast, and she has it actually dialed in for a specific name she came up with. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But there's a certain phrase that she came up with, and you're essentially stilling your own happiness. You're
Mhm.
not allowing yourself to ever celebrate a joy because, like the Indiana coach, when they score a touchdown or they fumble the ball, he has the exact same expression on his face. He has
Mhm.
no reaction. That's essentially it. You have to just, okay, this that didn't work. We're gonna go to the next one. And because for me, I was feeling like God has a plan, even if I don't know what it is, even if it's terrible, right? Because I want my own children, even
Mhm.
if that outcome is the terrible outcome, and we end up going through all these processes and draining all of the money that we have to do this. Well, at the end of it, I still have Mallory. I still have my wife. We will pursue another way. And so, without those things, I can see why people get into severe depression. They get, into they tear apart their own relationship. They end up eating each other because that negativity, once it starts, it is a snowball that it turns into an avalanche, and nobody's stopping it once you get down that path too far. And so always knew that. And I always had that in the back of my mind. And luckily I was just, raised reading the Bible and with wisdom. So
Mhm.
I already knew that even if this doesn't work the way I want it to work, God does have a plan for it to work.
For those who may not have that level of faith, what would you say would be the next best thing to help a man, or if you want to speak to women, this is dad talk.
Yep,
Um, eh,
100%.
what would you say would be the next best thing
Mhm.
that a man needs to help get through this?
Community.
Okay.
Community is what you need. And this is why I point out too that if you started telling people you wanted to do IVF, you will very quickly start finding people that you already know that have been through this process, or people very close to your inner circle. And man, it's those people that you can constantly and this go back and forth with, communicate with them initially.
Hmm.
You want to do that at the very up front. You don't want to go try to make friends with somebody and
Hmm.
build a community after you've just lost an embryo and now you're in the process of a second embryo, and maybe it's working, maybe it isn't, and you're getting bad blood work back. That's not the time to start reaching out. You need to do that at the beginning. You need to front load by building a community. And the great thing is, because we have social media, you can join Facebook groups, you can join all kinds of different groups. And again, I would recommend people that are local to you so that you can in person sit down and talk with people, because I will tell you, this is a very, even though we're talking online right now about this topic, man, if this were back in September in the thick of it, I don't necessarily just want to sit down and chat with somebody on a online call. I
Right.
want I want to I want to be in a room with you, and if we're talking about it, we're talking about it. And so that I think is the keys. Community. You have to have other people, not necessarily that have been through everything that you're going through. Their experiences might have been positive, and they just wanted one kid and they got one kid and that was it. Doesn't matter. The fact that somebody's been where you've been is what you want to be connected with. And again, building that relationship before you get to the tough parts.
Gotcha. So speaking of online, I have I'm mutuals with people that have done IVF, and sometimes through them I see some of the worst comments online about IVF. I've seen some just very horrible things, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I just want to shake people and just be like, "The hell is wrong with you?" And did you experience that either online or even worse in real life, where people had maybe were either dismissive or callous or even just downright vile?
I would say no to online, but I will say, because I didn't really have a following at
Hmm.
that point, and I wasn't really the one sharing. It was more of my wife is was sharing, and she has 250,000 followers, so she has a lot of people there. And the very first thing I would say is, how many of those comments that you're seeing are coming from bots?
Right.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I know 100% that there are bot farms all over the place. And I know from working in the defense contracting world, later on the civilian side, not as a bodyguard,
Hmm.
that that's something that we ended up, learning a lot more about. I'll just put it that way. And yeah, the number of these comments that everyone is getting that are horrible, they're horrible by design. They're not even people in our country that have all these fake accounts and sending horrific things to people. But I will say that, just like another person at from Podfest, Jen, that I just interviewed, she did get from legitimate people horrible comments. And I would say the exact same thing that was her attitude. It's like, either I'm going to let someone online control my life, and I'm going to stop doing what I love and all this positive change that I'm making in my life, and let alone in the positive comments that I'm getting. These are real people who are, because there's no bots out there just sending you a whole bunch of attaboys. It's
Mhm.
always the negative comments. That's what gets a reaction out of you, and that's what helps control people
Right.
in whatever way that whoever's using these bots are doing it. So I would honestly, and I think that's part of a mental strategy, is just, hey, if it's a bunch of negative crap, just, hey, those are bots.
Mhm.
And just, even if they are real people and they're that horrible,
Right.
they're bots, and just move on with your life. And I think that would make you a much happier person. I know Joe Rogan always talked about how he doesn't read his comments and those things, but maybe you have a third party read that
Right.
stuff for you, and legitimately, because that's part of that community.
Right.
If you're wanting to build that community, a lot of these people you're going to find too on social media. For I think you need both, obviously, like an in-person close group that when the times are rough, you can really go to them and have in-person conversations. But I think it's very valuable to be a part of a big community, because then it keeps that in the back of your mind that there's so many people out there going through this.
Mhm.
And then if you've got one that has a couple thousand people in it, anything under the sun that could possibly be thought of, somebody's going through. And
Right.
those are the ones that they're sharing with the community, because they're like, has anybody else dealt with this? And they'll put that out there. And that's something you've never even thought of. And one of those is going to be, I'll just throw this out there now, skipping forward to now, we still have 3 embryos, and my wife now no longer has the ability to have children. What happens to those 3 embryos?
Right.
Well, they don't necessarily tell you that up front. They don't like that. I mean, our clinic did go over it, but they just brush past it
Right.
and explain this and this is the basic details that you need as to what could happen in that possibility. And they go over so many of those things that you don't really necessarily stop and, okay, let's drill down on this. What happens if we lose the ability to have our own children? And this is an embryo. Like, most people aren't going to do that. And again, I wouldn't recommend people going down every tangent they can possibly come across. However, it is very valuable to know all these little things that you don't know or don't think of. And that's,
Right.
again, where that community will help you.
So I know we're getting close to our time.
Yep.
You are in your story, and then in real life, actually, you now have a happy little boy.
hmm Archer.
How old is he?
So he's 2.5. He
Oh,
he
awesome.
will he yeah he was born in July, and man, it was such an amazing, again, standing there watching the sunrise after the Jessica Lynch raid.
Mhm.
We got her out. She's safe. We've recovered the bodies of the others that were still there. Um, Earning my master's degree, my whole family tree are all high school dropouts. There are moments in my life that I will look back on, or obviously earning my Eagle Globe and Anchor on top of the Reaper in California.
Mhm.
There are moments that are the highlights of my life that I can still immediately feel. The moment that I picked up Archer and held him was, the others don't even come close.
Mhm.
And it sounds cliche, and everybody says they has the same answer for a reason. We're designed that way.
Mhm.
That holding your child for the first time is the most amazing experience you will ever have in your
Right.
life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, when my son was born, the nurses, and from my perspective, I was like, I had to kind of bite my tongue, because I was like, y'all are manhandling him, because they were
Mhm.
like flopping him around like he was a little doll, and I was like, yo, he's he's just been born. Like, why don't you calm down before you break him? You know, and then when you get to hold him, and I've got the picture, and it was an amazing feeling. And in my opinion, he's getting ready to turn 7 Sunday.
Mm. Okay.
And it has been the absolute best 7 years.
Mhm.
Even when you factor in the moments that weren't so pleasant,
Mhm.
you know, 3 in the morning hearing daddy poopy, and
Mhm.
you're like, oh boy, I got, because he's sick, and
Yep.
it's not just a simple diaper change. It's the worst diaper change. You consider all those things, and man, it's amazing. Is he starting to talk yet?
He is, and he's been able to communicate. He just comes up with his own words, and we just got to
Mm,
decipher his new
right.
language. The Penguin movie, he says boingy, so boingy boingy. He wants to watch the Penguin movie. So
That
yeah, it's you just
that's
have to decipher their own dialect.
That's awesome. One last quick question here. Actually, I got two. One from the
Mhm.
audience, and then one of my own. So, through the IVF process, I imagine there comes a point where you're like, the process itself is no more the risk. Like the risk is just your regular pregnancy, live
Mhm.
birth, et cetera, et cetera. Are
Yep.
you now that your son has been born, he's 2.5 years old. Are you past all the IVF concerns, and now you're just on to regular human
Yes,
concerns? Okay.
100%. Yep.
When was that where you were like, was it at birth, or was it sometime before birth where you could say, "Hey, any concerns with IVF are
Mhm.
no longer an issue. Now we're on to the standard, life concerns." When was that moment?
So because we did genetic testing, that is part of the answer. So for the people that don't do genetic testing, because it is several $1,000s more to do that, that leaves a lot of question marks that you still have. I think, and that's why we did it. And I have some holes that were in my spine when I was born. Never knew about it. All through the military, law enforcement, didn't know about it. And then one day my back started killing me. And then one day my back just like went out on me and I just crumbled down to my knees. Well, that I come to find out was spina bifida, and it's not affecting my whole spine, just like a couple spots.
Mhm.
But that was a genetic issue that I'm like, okay, well, now we need to focus on that with him. And when he was born, even with all these positive things, I still was just like, okay, we're still playing stoic here. We're still
Mhm.
just, we don't know. This could be the issue. And we went in and had him specially tested for that right after he was born. So if you already have already things that you want to know about, that's part of it too. But I would say once you get to like 2/3 of the way, 2/3 to 3/4 of the way, depending on your IVF clinic, they're going to shift you off of, even though you're technically still going to be a high risk pregnancy,
Mhm.
which is the same rules for geriatric, and they keep lowering the age for that. They consider everything that you're doing high risk, and so you're constantly doing blood work every single time. You're doing all these extra things that you don't normally do, but about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through, they are going to make a decision. The doctor is, and they're going to say, "Hey, you are now still considered high risk, but you're no longer, we're not going to be sitting here going back and forth with you looking at all of your stuff. You're under the care of your doctor and you're good." And so we
Gotcha.
stopped communication. I mean, we would communicate, on our own thing, but there wasn't this check-in with
Mhm.
the IVF process about, yeah, three-fourths of the way through, and then you're just on your own, and training wheels come off and you hope that everything's good. And with Archer, again, one in, one out, and every time that we took him, that we did a blood work, every time that we did a measurement of how big he was in an ultrasound, it was exactly what they were looking for. Like it was
Good.
it
Good.
was creepy. Like the nurses were like, it's exactly the number. This
Right.
is like 3 times in a row. I've never seen that in my life, that it's
Mm,
exactly the number we're looking for, is exactly the weight and height that he is. So it
gotcha.
was for us, the very first one with Archer, all those things made it again seem kind of surreal and too easy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we had a, somewhat similar experience. My wife and I had our son when we were in our early 40s, so she
mhm,
was considered a high-risk pregnancy, and we used to joke and say that she was medically boring, which, of course, in this particular case, is very desirable. So,
yeah.
but we would always joke, we'd go in and all of her every metric
Mhm,
was stellar.
Nice.
Right. And so
Yep.
it was, but it was a little unnerving because they're like, because we had to see two doctors
Mhm.
just for, just because she was 40, like 41, I think. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay. Second question here from the audience. Because of the chemicals used for this process and after a woman gives birth, can she still breastfeed? Meaning just the chemicals, not like criticizing, just this is a curiosity question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there none of that factors in. And breastfeeding is absolutely recommended, and just doing all of the most natural things that you can possibly do is something that we did. And my wife ended up more TMI, but she ended up doing the breast pumps
Mhm.
for the milk, and that's how I ended up being incorporated into it. So then I could help with that
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
were constantly doing frozen and unfrozen and all the
Right.
things you would do with normal breastfeeding process. So yeah,
Gotcha. We did
100%.
similar.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we're getting close to we're getting to the end, or we're at the end here.
Yep.
Final words that you would like to leave other men out there with, whether they're going through
Mhm.
IVF or not, or just whatever. Just any final words that you have for your fellow men out there.
Well, I would highly recommend that if you are young and you aren't married yet, you want to someday, be a father. As I already alluded to, I can tell you from a pretty interesting resume, I would say that I
Mhm.
have, um, which also included living on oil rigs and working in a federal prison and a lot of other very dangerous jobs. No matter what you accomplish there, no matter what rank you achieve, what award you get, there is nothing that will compete with you being a father and holding your child for the first time. And I would also say, as I've kind of hinted at this whole time, but without giving the whole story because of it would take a very long time to tell that whole story, losing an embryo, losing a child, and nearly losing your wife would be the lowest low. There's there are missions that I went on in the Ranger Regiment where I was told you are not coming back from the mission. Make sure that your death letter is sent to your family. Make sure that they know what to do with your remains, all the things. And I went on those missions and I came back. There is no sinking feeling that you will ever have like your wife fighting for her life and you can't do anything about it. Again, I am always going to go back to my faith. The reason why I mentally made it through all that and don't have all the things that a lot of people struggle with, um, PTSD specifically. There's PTS, but I don't have PTSD and the ability to go through the IVF process, the ability to find the right woman that you want to be married to for the rest of your life. And I'm going to be married to, right? That all only happens if you have a faith system. And I'm not trying to lead everybody to Christianity here, but I am telling you that, community is absolutely key. But my faith is the reason why I've mentally survived everything I've done. And I would highly recommend everybody else to at least search it out and see what you come up with.
Awesome. Sounds good, Seth. I appreciate it. I know you have to go. I'm gonna put you backstage. You can stay if you want. We can chit
Yeah,
chat after, but if you got to go, that's cool too. I understand. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Amazing
absolutely.
story, and I hope other men out there will see this and be just a little bit inspired, if not more.
Awesome. Much appreciated, brother.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you found it inspiring. Do me a favor, come back later, drop a comment in the chat, or yeah, and just kind of let me know what you thought of the episode. It helps the algorithm out, and I do read the comments. But if you're mean, I'm probably not going to give it too much thought. But anyway, with all that being said, I'll be out. I'll be back. I'm out, and I will be back Monday with another fresh bill review. I will see you then. Stay safe and guard your liberty. You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount.
or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because, every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and